Welcome back to IT Coach for Business Leaders. We're on episode number 12, and I've made a lot of progress with this podcast this year. I think we've had some great conversations, and hopefully today will be another good episode.
Yeah.
I'm Josh Davis, the Marketing Director at InfoSystems, and with me is Swann, vCIO, or Virtual CIO, whatever you want to call it, or just IT Guru extraordinaire, super fantastic IT guy.
Okay.
Overboard.
A little bit.
All right. So today we're going to kind of revisit a topic that we talked about last time, which was talking about the value of vCIO, the vCIO role that you sit in, or you could take it a step higher and say just the value of InfoSystems personnel, our IT personnel, the value that our humans bring to the table when
Sure.
working with our customers. And so, and there we've got a nice siren outside.
Yeah. I don't think they're coming here.
We get some good highway noise here at the InfoSystems building because we sit up above the interstate. And I guess maybe I'll throw out a disclaimer at this point that there is office construction remodeling still going on. So if there's background noise, we're sorry. We're in temporary space here, recording in a smaller conference room instead of our main conference room downstairs. But eventually we'll be back down there with a cooler background and
better chairs.
And better chairs, yes. So, anyway, okay, to get back to it. Talking about the role that the vCIO plays and just InfoSystems personnel in general, and sort of in the specific scenario today that we'll talk about with when companies are purchasing new software or implementing new software. And I really like this topic because I used to work for a software company. Before that, I worked for other IT infrastructure or IT services companies. So I've been on kind of both sides of this conversation with customers from the IT infrastructure and services perspective and from the software provider or software consultant or vendor, whatever you want to call it, from that perspective. And, it's two very different views and conversations around ultimately what is one project within the company, which is we need to install new software or implement new software. So to get started, I'd like to share a quick story about a conversation I had with the CEO of a large global software company that sells a specific manufacturing software package, and they sell it all over the world. And I was sort of blown away by the statement that the CEO told me, and he, in his words, specifically said that if we could just go in and implement our software, and that's all we had to worry about, we would be so much better off. But IT infrastructure causes problems every single time. His words. And I was just, sort of shocked to hear that. But when you think about it from the software company's side, they're really just focused on the software.
Yeah, that's what they do.
That's what they do.
Of software.
Their people support the software, implement the software, configure, customize, whatever it may be. They're not experts on IT networking and infrastructure, and so the business model that this company had, and this is not unique to them, lots of software companies do business this way, they would essentially provide a spec sheet of requirements that you need to have in place to run this software package. And of course we're talking about if it's an on-premise implementation, you need this equipment to run our software. Now, if it's a cloud implementation, I don't even know if they provide a spec sheet.
Well, I would hope they would, because there are still requirements that need to be in place.
Right.
And I think you're right. Sometimes they don't. It's just assumed that this is going to work.
Yeah.
But that's not a good assumption to make.
So given that business model and really the software company hands over that spec sheet because, and we'll probably bring this point up multiple times in today's episode, the software company doesn't want to do anything that's going to jeopardize their software project.
Yeah.
And so if they think that the company thinks that if they're also in the IT infrastructure business, that they're trying to overcharge and capture way more of the share of this project than they should. So they really try and just keep it in their lane. Let's talk software. All of that IT infrastructure stuff is, you can use whoever you want to accomplish that. If you have a current partner, if you need to go find one, that's going to be on you. We're just going to provide the software services. And there can be issues with that model. So what I'd like to kind of open up to you is, have you seen that model before? And what are the issues you see with that?
Sure, and let me clarify a few things to start off with. We were talking about the software companies, and that's their niche, and I'll say up front, that's not our thing, right?
Right.
We don't support major software packages. We'll do all the shelf stuff and help you install Microsoft Office and things like that, but as the whole, big systems, ERP systems and electronic medical record systems, practice management systems, and those kinds of things that companies, practically every one of the companies is going to be touching that software. It's what I call them run your business on packages, right? Mm-hmm. That they encapsulate a wide range of your business. We don't do those things, but we partner with companies to help bring that about, because that partnership is usually a very necessary step, because as we've said, those companies don't do infrastructure, they just do the software. So yes, I've seen the model. They're going to provide the specifications because we need them to do that. We need to know, what does your software take to have a successful implementation. I'll say this up front too, and I'm going to take a little jab at the software companies, particularly their sales folks. And I love you guys. We want you out there. We're glad you're selling this stuff, but and I think this is human nature too. The sales guys are not always completely forthcoming with just everything it's going to take in order for this to be a successful implementation.
Yeah.
Well, why? Well, because they're already asking the customers to spend, $4 signs, lots of dollar signs, and if they're honest with them, there may be a couple more dollar signs that need to be in there to get their system up to the place it needs to be to run that software successfully. Mm-hmm. That was especially true, or is especially true in an on-prem model, right? Because there's often new servers that have to be built. It could be new PCs that have to be purchased because you're running on old PCs. You may be talking about OS upgrades. There's a whole list of things that can be true. But it's also true in a cloud-based model. Just because the system is hosted up in a cloud, which really cloud is just a code for running somewhere else. Yeah. Okay, it's running in someone else's data center. There are still things that have to be in place to facilitate that connection. It may be different things, but PCs still certainly come into play because that's where the workload's being done. Now, other infrastructure, your network switches, those little boxes that no one ever thinks about, that just sit in a closet somewhere, your firewalls, your internet connection, and we'll talk more about some specifics about that. But all those things come into play, and I think sometimes they get left out of the discussion. Sometimes until the last minute, it's almost just like, okay, thank you, Mr. Customer, we have your signature. Oh, no, by the way, we need you to do these things too.
Yeah.
And, last minute is not the way to approach that. Anytime you're in a hurry to make a purchase, what happens? Well, you either don't get the best thing for you, you pay the highest price, or possibly both.
Yeah. You
may be paying more money for something that's not the exact fit. So those discussions need to happen early in the process. We're looking at your software package and what's it going to take for us to be successful.
Yeah, and I mean, I can you sort of understand how when the software company is going through all of the conversations, because I've been a part of those conversations before, there is so much, and especially when you're talking ERP or practice management software or professional services automation software, whatever it may be, if they're like a core business process software package, there are so many hurdles to get through to prove out, will this do everything I need it to do? How are we going to use it? Is this the right software for us to run? And there's no shortage of options out there. There's so many different software packages to do all, so many overlapping things. It's crazy. So you can understand how the conversation between the software provider and the company sort of always revolves around that.
Oh, absolutely.
Making sure the software is going to work for this implementation. And so, from the software sales perspective, once they get over that hurdle where the company says, okay, we think this is going to work for us, it's almost like a rush to, all right, let's sign off.
Yeah.
Not, okay, now let's have the next round of discussions,
Right.
and talk about what it's going to take to run and support this software in your company. And, right, salespeople are not necessarily real keen on adding more and more layers of complexity,
Right.
and they're more focused on, okay, let's get that signature and move on. So that can cause a lot of problems.
So they got to put food on the table too, right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Yeah, and the selling cycle for some of those larger core business applications can be extremely long. I mean, you could be talking 12 months to 24 months of going through proof of concept and statement of work and all, scoping out the entire project and all of that stuff before you finally get to the point of a signature. And so, if you've spent a year and a half working on a software deal, you don't necessarily want to add even more time on the back end of that. So, but from our perspective, as an IT services, infrastructure, networking, as the company that's going to really provide the value for running that software successfully, either on-premise or making sure the cloud integrates with all of the other on-premise stuff, to us, that's the most important part of the conversation, right?
because we want to put food on the table too, right?
Yeah. So anyway, let's talk about a couple of customers that you've worked with,
Sure.
Who were implementing or maybe are right now implementing some software, and talk about the value that you were able to provide to them through your role as vCIO. So go ahead and take that.
So we have a couple that we're actually working through right now. One's a manufacturing company, one's a medical practice. They are both doing things, run your business on software. One's an ERP system, one's electronic medical records and practice management, integrated in there together. I think one's probably going to end up being an on-premise solution. That particular company seems to like that model better. The other one's probably going to be cloud-based. So, talking about the on-prem, in that particular situation, some things that they needed to do, this particular company, believe it or not, here we are in 2018, still doing just file sharing through peer-to-peer networking, right? So they didn't have centralized file storage. The software company has already been forthwith and said, this is something you need to do, you need to integrate this together. They're looking at wanting to implement barcode scanning. They want to be able to, carry around handheld scanners that are wireless. So that's very much part of it too, is that wireless infrastructure has to be put in place to support those scanners. They needed better firewall protection in place to protect that data. Up till now, their data has been limited to just some office documents shared on that peer-to-peer. Now they're talking about running their business on this one database that may be housed on a server there, and that's the crown jewels. And so that's got to be protected. So there's several things that we're talking or have been talking to them about that we need to put these things in place for you before the company comes in and starts installing the software. Looking at the electronic medical record side, it said that's probably going to be a cloud implementation, the way it's trending right now. Here's a freebie I'll throw out. Anytime that you're talking about putting a critical workload into the cloud, you need to make sure that you have engineered away as many single points of failure as you can to access that. It's a different situation when that database, we're here in Chattanooga, Tennessee, that cloud database may be running, it may be running in Washington State, right?
Mm-hmm.
All the way to the other side of the country. Well, between here and Washington State, there's a lot of points that could break between here and there. And a lot of those, unlike in your local data center, you have no control over. You have no control over if someone hits a telephone pole and knocks down your internet connection between here and there. So what you do have to do is engineer for redundancy in there. So one of the things I would always tell a customer if they're looking to put significant resources up into a cloud is you need to have redundant connections to that. So that means redundant internet connections. That means redundant firewalls, because if your single firewall goes out, there goes your internet connection as well. It could mean redundant switching, depending on the size of your office, to make sure that you always have a path from your PCs to get out to there, or at least some of your PCs. Mm-hmm. Maybe it means splitting the load between a couple of switches so that if one fails, the whole office doesn't go down.
Yeah.
That's going to be true even in an on-prem situation as well, that splitting that load up so that single points of failure, and we've said many times on this podcast, no company has unlimited stacks of cash sitting around to do this. So it takes doing some risk analysis to determine, what's it going to cost me if I go down, and how can I mitigate against that? What money can I spend to keep that from happening?
You just ran through a lot of information about, so for a company that's going to be running a core business application in the cloud, and you're talking about, all of these potential points of failure, several of which you mentioned were within the four walls of the company.
Right.
When you're talking internet connection and firewall and switching, et cetera, et cetera. And then all of the ones outside. The cloud software company is not going to be telling the end customer
Probably not, no.
that you need to look out for all these potential points of failure. So, to me, that, all of that stuff you just ran through just proves out the value that someone in your position brings to the table for someone who is doing a software implementation, which is, hey, we've made the decision to purchase this software. We believe it's going to be impactful for our company. They would not be shelling out whatever money and time and staff energy that it takes to do a software implementation if they didn't think that was going to change the way they do business for the better. Mm-hmm. So if we've made that decision, of course I'm going to want to do the things to make sure that system runs optimally. Because if the system goes down, I'm not getting any benefits
Right.
of the system, of the software package, and potentially it could be downtime for my company, especially when you're talking like barcode scanning and things like that, which are essential for the inventory transactions and all of the stuff that's happening at a company. If that stops, the company is likely to not be able to continue doing business while there's downtime.
Right.
So absolutely, companies should want to ensure that every single point of failure has been uncovered, discussed, and addressed, and as you say, engineered around to prevent it from being a single point of failure. Because if things go wrong, it could even take time to figure out where things went wrong.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. Yeah, and I would say, I mean, these are all business level discussions. It's not purely an IT statement. You know, there's not a one size fits all. Yes, I can. So you know, IT resiliency is measured in nines, right? So you measure how long I'll be up. So anywhere from 99% to 99.999. More nines cost more dollars to have more reliability. But that's a business decision. You have to determine what's my cost of being down. You know, if my cost of and you know, I have customers in both boats. I've had customers that can tell me in good conscience, you know what, if we're down for a couple of days, that's okay. We can survive that. You know, so engineer me for maybe 99%. That's still 99%. If you do the math on that, that's still a lot of downtime, potentially. You know, then we have companies that say, man, every hour I'm down, I'm losing thousands and thousands of dollars. I've got to engineer that, because ultimately anything that's man-made, it's going to break down at some point. So you've got to put those systems in place. And so there's not a one-size-fit-all for every company. It depends on your industry.
Yeah.
Depends on what your risk factors are.
I know, you know, there are manufacturing companies who have production lines that run 24/7,
Right.
and are scheduled out probably months in advance. You know, so if that goes down, you're talking major cost.
Right.
Whereas you're right, you know, there may be some companies who say, if we were down for a day, we could recover fairly easily
Right.
from that. But, you know, yeah, it's just the nature of your business. And so that's a great point that you bring up, that it's a business level discussion about risk and tolerance for downtime, and, you know, all of that needs to be built into whatever solution is taking
Absolutely.
place. So anything else about, so, you know, we've touched on a couple of different industries there, manufacturing and medical practices, but there are core business applications for, you know, whatever type of business companies are in. Are there any consistent themes that can be drawn across all of these different types of software and industries, such as, you know, if you're looking at doing an on-premise solution, here's the best advice, or here's some best practices. Or if you're looking at cloud software as a service, you kind of already ran through some of the things you should look
Sure.
at, but anything like that we could share?
I think that the other factor that we really haven't touched on is just the whole idea of, I would call it the user equation. And there's a couple facets to that. One is, as you're making that software decision, make sure that the end users, the people that are going to be using the software the most on a daily basis, are involved in that discussion, to make sure that they are able to understand and use the software as it fits within their processes, that they do so. You know, it's fairly common that when you bring in new software, businesses processes do have to change and adapt, and just that those process change can be painful, and that's not really an IT thing as much, but it revolves around the whole IT discussion. That, you know, so I would make sure that you've got your users involved in those initial sale discussions.
Yeah.
The other side of the user equation, I think, it does come very much back to the IT factor, and that's, you know, for lack of a better word, I use just the whole ergonomics, and just the fit of the equipment that they're using can be huge. Again, you know, human beings don't like to have things dictated to them sometimes.
Yeah.
And it can be super important during those discussions to determine, you know, what's going to be usable, even down to the PC level. You know, you notice on camera here today, I'm running a little MacBook that I run both Windows and Mac OSs on, because I have customers that have both. It allows me to play in both worlds and kind of stay up to date. You're running a Microsoft Surface Pro, right?
Yeah, Surface Pro.
And so those are two completely different devices. We can both run our in-house software on them. because it's compatible across a variety of platforms. So it's making sure that you can address the specific needs, both from a business point of view, because my job functions different than yours.
Yeah.
So I have the need to be able to support both operating systems, but it's also my individual quirks and stuff. It's making sure that you can address your users where they live, so that you can make them the most productive possible.
Yep.
So I think it's super important to have those discussions up front when you're considering this kind of a large change.
Yeah, and I would say it's not rare for a company to dictate to their employees, this is the device you're going to use, or this is what you're going to be issued. Live with it.
Yeah, and I mean there's something that's got to go on, right? Because there's certain value in being able to scale on one particular platform. You can get realized discounts for buying multiples of the same models, but by all means have those discussions, include them in those decision making, so that people at least understand this is why we're going down this particular route.
Yeah, that's good advice. So just to reconnect the discussion that we've had back to the intro and the point of this episode, which is to talk about the value that a virtual CIO, a senior level IT consultant, can have to a company. Software implementation is just one thing that happens within a company where this could provide significant value, and there are so many others. So, I guess the intent here is just to raise awareness that companies in our region, let's talk to the non-IT business leaders. The business leaders from companies in our region can really avoid and mitigate a lot of bad situations, a lot of expense, and let's just say they could create ideal systems just by having resources such as yourself come in and take a look at things, work with their existing IT staff, their personnel, talk with the management, the leadership team, and really work on bringing that all together and creating the ideal platform or the ideal environment for that company, that unique company.
I think it's all about creating the best, most efficient use of all of your money and time by looking at that whole big picture. A lot of times IT systems are just approached very much on a independent, ad hoc, we're going to deal with this problem today, and a lot of companies that we've walked into over the years, it's obvious from the moment that you walk in that there's not a cohesive design to the whole infrastructure. It's just a daily transactional, we had this problem, we ran out and bought this, and with no forethought to how does this impact this, or how does this impact the decision we're about to make 3 months down the road.
Yeah.
So I think it's important to bring in either someone in-house that has experience, or an external, or a consultant of some type that can help give you that big picture view.
Well, that's some great advice, and so hopefully for our listeners out there who may be looking at some type of software initiative in the near future or even distant future, this is a call to action to bring in that outside perspective and make sure things go as smoothly as they should with that software implementation. And I'll circle back real quick to that conversation we had with the CEO of the software company, who is sort of working with InfoSystems now to put together a suggested infrastructure package. So if they're going to present a software implementation, they're also going to ask us to address all of the requirements that they're suggesting and put together, the suggested package to handle the IT side of it, the back end of it, and present that to the customer together as, okay, you know what we're going to do with the software, and here's the costs associated to that. Here's our recommended approach to the infrastructure side. And of course, they're not going to force their customers into that, but they want to be able to provide that up front so that the customers know, okay, if we want to execute this optimally, this is what we're looking at. And they could take that and do business with someone else. That's fine. From our perspective, we're doing a service to that for both the software company and the purchasing company by trying to help make sure they don't just look at the software side of it. So anyway, I thought that was cool that this software company cares enough about their customers that they want to sort of present them with an ideal infrastructure solution along with the software solution. So
I think it goes back to just being a win-win for both companies, right?
Yeah.
Because the smoother they can make it, the happier that customer is going to be in the long term, and the longer they're going to be a customer.
Yep, that's right. So I guess I would say if there's software companies out there who don't have a trusted IT partner who they can lean on to provide that information to their potential customers or existing customers, that hey, you can reach out to us as well, and we'd be happy to talk
Absolutely.
to you. So great episode again, Aaron. Thanks for participating, and thanks for all the great advice you're bringing to the table for our local business leaders. And until next time.
All right.